So hello, everyone. Welcome to Live with the Pricing Lady. I'm Janine Liston, your hostess. This show is all about helping you get better at pricing in your business so you can have a sustainably profitable business and be there to serve your customers well into the future. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to today's guest, Amanda Berlin.
Hey, Janine. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. And actually, most people probably don't know this, but this is your second time visiting with us. So super excited to have you back.
I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So why don't we start with a couple of rapid fire questions? First of all, Amanda, where are you from?
I am from New Jersey originally. I can tell you all the places that I feel like I'm from. I also would say my gut feeling is I'm also a New Yorker.
A New Yorker.
Actually, I lived in Manhattan for the longest sustained period of time, 15 years.
Wow. Amazing. Cool place. And Amanda, what is your superpower?
I love this question. My superpower is being a champion for anyone in my life. I can find the thing about you, about my daughter, about my clients that is uniquely amazing and illuminate that thing so that you feel really great about it too. And you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that about myself. And maybe I should celebrate that.
Oh, I love that. Being a champion for others. That's a great skill, great superpower to have.
Especially
Fantastic.
in my line of work.
Yeah. Very true. So what's one interesting thing that most people don't actually know about you?
Most people don't know that I am an extraordinarily slow reader. It takes me forever to finish a book because my reading is sacred time. That it's like the last thing I do before I fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And I usually can read about a page or so at a time. And I relish the moments where I get to sit and read as like a leisure activity during the day and not as the last thing at night, but it doesn't happen that often. Yeah. So I basically spent all of high school like not reading anything that was assigned because I felt like it was such a rapid succession of material. I just couldn't keep up, and it was not things that I chose or that I was interested in. And now that I can choose, I love reading. I just read at a very slow pace.
A leisure pace. Let's call that leisure, not slow. All right, excellent. So now in a moment, we're going to get into your pricing journey. But before we do that, I'd like to give people an understanding of what's the value, because of course, pricing is related to value. What's the value that you really bring clients?
I love that. The value that I bring clients is an awareness and an understanding and a skill set that they can utilize to put their business out there in a way that has been proven over decades in the PR world. So I help my clients be visible on behalf of their businesses without spending money on ads and without relying on a massive team, because I teach them how to do their own PR based on the tactics that we utilized in the corporate PR world, adapted for solo entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Right. Okay. Excellent. And what does having that ability to do that visibility bring them in the end?
Oh, it brings them more clients, more credibility, more visibility, more fame, more expert status, validity to their business.
Okay. Super. Excellent. Sounds fascinating. I know I worked with Amanda years ago, enjoyed it very much. So can highly attest to her skills in this area. So why don't we start digging into your pricing journey? When you first started your business, what was it like when you sat down and first priced something?
Yeah. So I came from the PR agency world. And when I left my corporate job, really what I kind of fell into, which I think is probably not unusual, was a freelance model where I was pricing my work on an hourly basis or on a monthly retainer, but where I was creating a project scope from scratch for each individual client. And that's where my journey began.
And how did that work for you? What did you find out or learn along the way with that?
I learned that it was very inefficient in terms of bringing in new clients. It had me kind of reinventing the wheel every time someone new came to my doorstep, figuratively. And it really had me scrambling just in the constant client acquisition scramble.
Now, one of the things that you wrote about in the application form for this was your biggest pricing learning. And one of the things you said was that you realized you were selling a premium service or a high touch service at a low touch price. Can you tell us more about how you came to that conclusion and what you did?
Yeah. So, I mean, this was an organic journey for me. And I shifted my model after sort of that freelance season to a consulting service where I developed, and I help my clients do this as well, because part of the visibility journey is feeling really confident in your offers and the language you use to describe your offers. So I shifted my offer to be something that really delivered a system so that I was guiding clients through a process that was articulated based on my experience in the corporate world. And I developed a framework and deliverables based off of that would get, tweaked based on each client's individual needs, but not reinvented each time. The service was sort of like a baseline, like this is what we do. And I started that at, what I deemed at the time actually was quite a scary price point for me. It was, and granted right now, like, it's so interesting to look back because that was probably about 5 or so years ago after, probably 3 years of toiling in the freelance zone. I ventured to shift to this model. And then 5 years on, bringing us to today, I'm pricing that a similar service with a lot more support from a lot more tools, a lot more support from my team as well, at basically 4 times what I was pricing it in the very beginning. So but at the time that pricing was very scary to me to offer. So that was really where it began, was creating an offer based on a system that I guided clients through that, had particular deliverables and was priced the same for each person that came in.
Excellent. So I have a little bit of a situation here. We'll see what happens. My neighbor upstairs plays the bagpipes.
Oh my goodness.
And he just started practicing. I don't know if you can hear it, anyone, but
I can't.
Perfect.
Wow, what a great microphone you have.
Okay, good to know. So I find that really interesting, first of all, because I think a lot of people get stuck in this freelance mode and trading time for money. And I find it interesting because it, as you were describing it, it actually hits 2 things. So one, it's costing you more because it's taking you so much time to reinvent the wheel and make these customized offers for every little thing. And then on the other hand, you're not charging enough for it. So it actually has an impact on your profitability from more than one side.
Right. That's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't really take that into consideration. And, I'm sure that you realize this now, but when you charge more, then you actually need fewer customers in order to get to the same goal that you have for your business. So it really does have some positive side effects.
Yeah. And I'll also add to that, from my position as a champion for my clients, it really serves your client better when they can trust you as having developed a system to solve their problem. So if you're constantly, squirreling down notes and creating a custom package, there's this element of like, oh, like she's creating something for me based off of what? Based off of, it's obviously not nothing, but it's not based off of when you develop a system, there's an air of confidence that you get to put out there and communicate to a potential client that you have a path for them already pre-written.
Right. That the steps are clear to you, at least as the expert. And they can rely on that as sort of a lifeline for what they need to do. And I agree that it's beneficial to your clients as well. Very much so. Yeah. There's a reason people have the 5 steps to this and the 8 ways to do that. because it helps people to understand. And also what I found, Amanda, was until recently, I had a hard time. People expect from me an equation, a mathematical equation to set their price. And there isn't such a thing, right? But I hadn't come up with precisely the right way to do it. And recently, just in the last 6 months or so, I came up with a way to explain it to people. And now I see the light bulb come on for people so much more quickly. And it's really exciting when you can find that for your clients.
That's great. Absolutely.
So Amanda, when you had to charge more, how did you gear yourself up to do that?
Yes. Well, I think you and I have talked about this pricing crisis that I had kind of in that middle space in my business, where I introduced a service that was a shorter term service, but I was charging a premium price for it. And it was more than like my longer term service. And it just made no sense that I would be charging this much more for something that was short term than this like longer term, month on month work with me. And so I backed myself into a corner in terms of needing to raise my prices. And so I felt like it was this necessary thing that I had to do. And I remember distinctly one day, I just on the fly, like literally, I don't think I really applied a ton of thought to it. I must have in the back of my mind, but on the fly on a consult call with a client, I named my new higher price for that longer term one-on-one service. And that was it. That was just the price.
So you just dove right into the deep end.
Yep.
And sometimes this is where people find them because they've ignored the topic for so long that they get into a position where they either have to change things dramatically or exit the business. And that may not have been that extreme of a case in your example, but this is quite often where people find themselves.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So what do you think is the most important thing that you've learned in, I don't know how many years you've been in business, I forgot to ask that, but in your years of business, when it comes to either the value you offer or how you work with your pricing?
Yeah. So I've been out of corporate since January 13th, 2012. And so I toiled and it was a Friday the 13th too. I toiled in kind of the freelance, cobbling it together phase for probably about 3 years. And then I was, or maybe even 4 years. And then I really was adamant, like, I know that this business can be so much more and I need to, like you said, make a drastic change, get some support. So I hired my first coach, even though it was terrifying. And I think that what I've learned over the years in terms of the value that I bring and the value that we can articulate out there into the world, maybe that's really the learning, is that it's so important to to feel confident with your communication. And that's really my whole purpose in my business, is to help my clients feel comfortable, not just comfortable, but feel excited, enthusiastic about talking about how they serve, because this is what engages a prospective client. And the pathway to becoming enthusiastic about talking about how you serve is by really embracing your expertise, creating a path for a client to engage in order to utilize your service, which really does validate you as an expert, and really just being your own best spokesperson, and engendering trust when you talk about who you are and what you do.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it is a leap of faith in yourself in some ways, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you don't trust yourself, I mean, like, you know where I'm going with the statement. If you don't trust yourself, you don't trust your process, then how can you expect someone else to?
Yeah. Yeah. Very well put. Very well put. So what do you think the biggest mistakes are that people make when it comes to expressing the value or communicating well with their clients, or even pre-clients, I guess you'd call them?
Prospective clients. Yeah. I think that a lot of the mistakes come in the run up to and in the sales conversation. And I work with my clients on really every aspect of communication inside their business. So the sales conversation is one of my most favorite things to work on, because it's really the most confronting, I think, for many of us. But I think that for many of the women who I work with, and some men, the call to action, being muddy about the call to action in terms of what you want someone to do when they hear about you, because that's our ultimate work, is getting you ready for your close-up, for your visibility, and then getting you out there and having you be visible on behalf of your business. But you're not going to be ready to be visible if the foundation is still shaky, meaning if your messaging, if your sales conversations, if your offers are not super solid and things you can feel really good about, you're not going to feel ready to put yourself out there. So once you have the solid foundation, and we've worked through all of that, and you've started to put yourself out there, I think some of the mistakes come with not really being clear about what you want people to do once they hear about you. And in many cases, the call to action can be as straightforward as book a consult with me.
The easier, the better with a call to action, right?
Absolutely. And then after they're on your calendar, how you guide them through that process of that consultation.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. The initial consultation, I think a lot of people misuse that call instead of it being an opportunity to help the client get clarity and vet them from your side. A lot of people use it to try and, do a little dog and pony show about how valuable they can be. I'm curious about your experience with that.
Yeah, that on so many levels, it's a huge mistake, the dog and pony show, because it creates a false sense of empowerment on behalf of the client. They think that they can go out and do the thing because you've given them, even just like a little tidbit of information. And it absolutely sabotages the sale, because the minute, and it's some kind of voodoo magic, like black magic that happens the minute you give advice on a consult call is the minute that the sale is gone, because they think that they can go and do it themselves. So whatever you do, avoid giving advice on your sales calls.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, straight from Amanda's mouth to our ears. Avoid the urge to give advice during those calls. I admit just from time to time, I catch myself doing it as well over the years. And I agree with you. It does have an impact on the direction of the call for sure. Excellent. So Amanda, we're going to need to start wrapping this up here. I've got a few more questions for you. What's one thing that you think people should take away from our pricing discussion today?
I would say that knowing your value. Also, I think that that's a little bit of a, trite maybe takeaway, but I think that don't shy away from the challenges that are confronting you when it comes to your pricing. As I was confronted with this, like, I'm going to have to raise the price on this service. And I just kind of stood up to that challenge and just did it on that, that fateful sales call where I just kind of plunged in and was like, well, this is the new price. I guess this is the new price.
I've done that from time to time over the years. Who said that? But no, it's true. Take action, especially if your inner voice is telling you that something needs to be done there. Absolutely. What's the best of business advice that you've been given over the years?
That is a great question. The first thing that I wrote this in one of the media bios that I wrote early on in my career. And I said that the best business advice I ever got was from my dad, which was simply be happy. And my dad is not like a happy-go-lucky kind of, I guess I wouldn't really describe him that way. I'd describe him as really straightforward and cynical and dry, but yet he always made me feel resourceful and empowered and like I could trust myself. And so I would say that was a great parenting move.
Right. I love that. Resourceful, empowered, and trusting in yourself. That's the trifecta. Business advice, right? Excellent. What's a favorite book or tool that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Okay. So one of my favorite books that is, related, I think that any entrepreneurial endeavor is a true exercise in personal development. So I think they go hand in hand. And one of I read, as you know, slowly, but also I read fiction mostly because, like I said, it's my sacred leisure time activity. But I was on a kick a while back of reading personal development. And one book that I came across that I will recommend here was called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And she is a Western psychologist with a heavy influence from the Buddhist culture. And there's so many little nuggets in that book. And you can also download her talks from her Insight Meditation Center, which is, I think, is in the Washington, D.C. area here in the States. She really integrates pop culture and humor with a lot of her teachings. And I so appreciate that. But some of the things that I took away from that are really that a lot of what we experience, a lot of the pain that we experience is optional, because there is some pain that is not optional, but then there is pain that we inflict upon ourselves through the judgment of our experience of the initial pain. And she calls that I think it's a Buddhist concept, the second arrow. So the first arrow is the initial hurt. That may be inevitable. But the second arrow is something that we've inflicted upon ourselves by judging our reactions to that first pain.
Yeah. Yeah. So that book is behind me on this bookshelf here somewhere.
Amazing.
Well, I used to teach mindfulness as well.
Yes,
so
that's right.
way back in the olden days.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I can second that. It's a great book and very transformational. Super. So one last question before we go. How can people reach out to you if they'd like to find out more?
I would love to chat with anyone who is inspired by this conversation, or even if it hit a nerve and you're like, I'm not inspired. You can find me on Instagram at Amanda Gail, Gail Berlin, Amanda Gail Berlin. And actually starting next week, I'm running a free visibility challenge that's going to give you a different thing to do each day for the whole week to be more visible on behalf of your business. So I would love for you to
like I need to join that.
Yes, Janine.
Sounds like fun.
And you will learn all about the challenge.
Okay. I'll put those links and other links in the show notes for everyone so that they can have a look at that. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being on the show. Once again, it was such a pleasure to have you here.
It was such a pleasure to chat with you, Janine. Thank you so much. Thank you for creating space for these conversations.
Yeah. Oh. Excellent. So everyone, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, if you'd like to find out more about how to improve pricing in your business, then head on over to thepricinglady.com. It is that time of year where you're probably thinking about what you're going to do in 2022. So be sure to book a call with me there and let's take a look at how we can improve your business. Until next time, everyone, enjoy pricing.